let's address the next panel. I know that Andres and Mario are waiting there in the room, so I would like to acknowledge Juntina Abricio, that is the Undersecretary of Information Technology. She's also my boss, so please ask her good questions. And the National Secretariat of Guatemala, that is here with us today, Ana Judith Chan Chorantes. While they come to the rostrum, let me tell you that Argentina is member of the Partner to Connect. So our boss's boss is, thank you very much, is our boss's boss is Michaela Sanchez Malcolm. She's our representative for our Partners to Connect, and Argentina is a member nation of Partners to Connect. So we're glad to have you here. Agostino, you have also a position on the ITU. Yes, and I work for the telecommunications group there. So ladies are very well represented. Just to follow protocol, let me give the floor first to Raul. Raul, are you there? We have Raul and Mario online. Can we see them? Can we screen that on the screen, please? Here we have what happens with resilience, how Latin America is approaching this issue. We have also students from Latin America and across the world. Raul, Mario, can you hear me? Good. We can see you from here. Sorry for the delay because it's part of the culture to have delays in Latin America. Sorry to delay the conference, but we had some technicalities that we had to overcome. Digital transformation in Latin America implies how a region leverages digital transformation to be included in a more equal world, a more developed world. I will give the floor to Raul, who is a very well known person in the IT world. He was the CEO and president of ACNIC, that is our NIC, regional NIC, and then he worked for Internet Society, and right now he presides like that is the internet group for Latin America. So, how do you see the challenge of digital transformation in Latin America? Raul, you have the floor. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you very much for having invited me, Olga. Thank you for giving me the chance to participate in this conference, and I would like to acknowledge the panelists and the students that are in the room today. As you said, one should answer this question, and there are many gray areas, so you cannot say yes or no. Digital transformation and digital development and the impact of digital challenges on the economy, the opportunities of having more inclusive opportunities. Those are all kinds of issues. And that's not where the problem lies. The problem is how we approach this. And if we draw some statistics like Internet World Stats that has or carries statistics over the internet shows that in Latin America and in the Caribbean, there's 80% of internet access. However, this is an overview and in a way kind of overlooks the heterogeneity of the region. Apart from having 20% of people not being included in the internet or not having access to the internet, and that kind of helped me with my conference because that is a loss of access to opportunities that sometimes people take for granted because we have organized our lives with the many tools that we have that probably are apparent or they come to us naturally. But 20% of those people that are in the region do not have access to the internet, especially in a country where we have 40% of internet penetration. It's not the same being in a community in Sao Paulo, in downtown Sao Paulo, or in the rural sector, or in a farm of Chile or Uruguay. So it's a horse of a different color in that way. So we have many, many challenges. Whether we like it or not, There are many things or many challenges that we need to overcome urgently. And one has to see that there are many things that we can draw as conclusions, positive conclusions. We believe that the development of the digital economy has shown that we have increasing talents in the region. We have rising talents, but the challenge is to have enough talents. But we have innovation capacity, talent, successful stories in the public and in the private sector that allow us to do these things successfully. So, what is missing? Well, we have probably consistent policies missing across the region. We are very good to hinder things. For example, at the government level, there's a clear view and there's a clear understanding of what digital development is. However, sectorial policies contradict the objectives or the goals that countries set. So we have a great challenge ahead of us of having more consistent legal frameworks in line with the objectives that we have set. We need to see that we have recommendations from the political point of views. There are many things that we have to do. Sometimes a government has a general bias or a general political view, and they may borrow a recommendation like depending highly on who is recommending this. But there are some recommendations that are agnostic. There's not a political ideology of how we approach this, but it is clear that we need to reach everybody with connectivity and to make progress with the digital financial inclusion that will facilitate the transformation of SMEs, more inclusive development approaches, and things like that. So, if we need to give them opportunities regardless of gender, ethnics, locations, not only do we need connectivity, but also to create the necessary conditions to have digital financial inclusion. An SME transformation scheme and things like that. These are the elements that we need. We have a to-do list, basically. Elements that we need to approach in order to realize this vision. So we have to approach this from the regulatory framework at the regional level, in line with the objectives that we have in the region. Because generally we have a vision of how this operates in the United States or how this works with the regulatory framework, with the business focus. And that's one vision. And then we have another vision in other parts of the world that is like in China, for example, where we have a supervision that is strongly made on the part of the state. And then the European vision, where you have a lot of guarantees and where regulation is the goal in itself. So our interests are not in line with these three pillars, and we need to come up with our own um, model where people are important, where there's guarantee, and when we have sustainable development goals different from the other models. We need to be concerned with the rights protection of the citizenry and with the possibilities that this tool give us for development. Economic development is one of the goals in the region. We need to make progress, as a matter of fact, in economic development. And however, we need to set course for a more inclusive development model to alleviate the necessary tensions or to address the challenges that we have in the region. That we believe that there's a large percentage, dependent of the locations, of people that are not satisfied with the opportunities that they have. So we need to provide them with a more equitable and well balanced opportunity model in society. So thank you very much for giving us the chance to speak or to address my speech in this conference. You said that we need to help SMEs that are the basis for sustainable development in Latin America. One of the things that Doreen said is that there is coverage. However, there's a lack of access on the part of stakeholders and SMEs or individuals to pay for the service, to foot the bill, or to purchase equipment in order to leverage digital technology. So, what you said about semesters is very important. Can you stay with us in case there's a question that is raised in the audience? I know that you're holding another conference, so I wish you success, and I would like to thank you for your time. Mario, there are two people from San Martin, Anai and I. Mario is from my locality that competes with my hometown, that is Palmira. Mario is the Minister of the Supreme Court of Justice of Mendoza. And if you follow his profile, he takes care of AI, the judicial system improvement, metaverse. He's very involved in all these technologies. He's a friend and a collaborator of the South School of Internet Governance. It's great to have you here. I imagine that we're going to find you face to face in another conference. Could you give us your overview of transformation in Latin America? What is your perspective as Supreme Court Justice in and as an expert on these kind of issues? Thank you very much for giving me the chance. As Adriana and Olga said, with this detail and with this description of how we approach things with these localities and the rivalries that we have with the cities in the interior of Argentina that is typical of Argentina and of Latin America. So it's kind of funny. I would like to acknowledge everybody that is part of this panel and to the students also that are involved in this conference, that are attending this conference online and face to face. So I would like to thank you for giving me the chance to speak as a panelist. Let me address some reflections that has to do with internet governance. I believe that we are covering these issues, especially on W3, World 3. What is this model that is hacking national and economic sovereignty, that is making quantum leaps? And this is the model. This is Web3, okay? And let me address the internet because what has been acknowledged from the legal standpoint and constitutional standpoint is that internet access becomes a human right. After the evolution of social, economic, and cultural rights, and thereafter the second wave of environmental and consumer rights, we know that there's a digital life, and we realized this during the pandemic that this is not merely e commerce or having social networks, that we had a digital world. So the human being needs to be addressed from this point of view in rights. We are addressing the personal data protection law that needs adjustments and amendments. And as Raul said, the three models where we have learned, whether it is the American, the European, and the Chinese, even though the United States are making some changes, we believe that the United States has been approaching this from the regulatory point of view, different from the different positions. And as a matter of fact, over the last 40 years, most of the CEOs from multinationals have been reaffirming this kind of analytical approach. Internet has been evolving and it has evolved in line with the data protection because we need to address this from the same point of view as we address it in W2. This is from the legal, ethical, and economical approach. So it's the person, the individual, and his or her data. Even though this kind of information is important, you should approach it from the human rights point of view, acknowledging those laws. Then we have everything that has to do with digital transformation, as it was well explained by Doreen and Raul. Everything that has to do with the Latin America situation and the divide, economic development and technology divide, from the point of view of access, literacy, development, and the different age groups that may be included in kind of raising awareness of technology. So the state plays a key role thanks to this space, for example, that we have of SSIG and the Latin America School of Internet Governance gives us a chance to address this. However, for those of us that come from the legal field, we are very interested in regulating, and sometimes we have something that is intangible. It's difficult to be out of the comfort zone, and when it's intangible, and when it's not fungible or tangible, we have a problem. We may encounter some challenges, and here we have the internet. As Olga said, we had to address topics from artificial intelligence, blockchain, in W3, and the discussions there are how to approach this new limitless or frontierless or lack of sovereignty world that is in a way detrimental to democracy, because the modern state was invented and we had representatives that made decisions on behalf of the majority. And right now, the citizens is consulted, and there are some representatives that may challenge the system. So we need to have a well-balanced view combining the two views, like human rights protection, and on the other hand, by approaching this from the regulatory or from the governance point of view, to facilitate economic development in Latin America. So regulation should not overwhelm development. So we need to be smart enough from the regulatory and from the constitutional and ethical point of view and economically, and to think of possibilities of having a new ecosystem joining the academic, private, public sector together with entrepreneurs. So Latin America has enormous human capital, successful human capital, but what is required is regulations on the part of a state with political leaders that should know the importance of technologies, not only of networks, not only having community managers or influencers. They need to evolve and to be trained in technology, because if topics of technology are addressed like 6 hertz and how we're going to run it and where we're going to have 5G, they need to train and they need to be educated. For example, we had search engines that are discussed in the justice system, and the coverage was discussed by the media that they were discussed, where topics were discussed, and the political leaders were not really educated or literate on this topic. So they need to understand, we need to raise awareness of what technology is, because this is modeled by society and by artificial intelligence. So Web3 is not only related to cryptocurrency, but also with an architecture or with a horizontal model that hacks whatever they feel like it. So you said, well, this is not possible. Let's analyze it in 5 years. But no, I mean, for those of us that are adapt to technology, you have the bright and the negative side, because the role of the state should play a key role. by setting public policy at the national or Latin America regional level. So the the internet governance, together with the multi-stakeholders understanding the ecosystem and addressing this from a different point of view, not by prohibiting or by applying regulations, but something that allows for inclusion, not only allowing for international for artificial intelligence having biases that may be good for a well-balanced society or a very well-developed society, but especially for these societies that there are large inequalities, we shouldn't have this bias. We should be included in or inclusive, and technology should allow for this level of inclusion that in some other aspects this is not highly discussed. This is fixed or set by public policy related to technology, and this will help us to develop a new model. And then the role of the state in other dimensions. The first problem that we have, or the first challenge that we have in all public transformations, is governance of data. We have challenges in the way we gather and we treat and we deal with the data, the interoperability of data for the state. We have the undersecretary of Argentina that has a long track record in addressing this. So, how the state deals with this data? How did they transform the way they approach data? What is their strategies to transform human capital and then infrastructure and technology once they learn how to use technology? Clearly, internet is designed to be free, democratic, and open. What happens is that sometimes it's in the hands of a few, but we have the new opportunity of Web3 that is going to be addressed by anonymity, by openness, and development. I believe that these are the first steps. However, in 3 or 4 years' time, we believe that the South School of Internet Governance will be discussing the play or the role played by Web3 in our society. Thank you, Mario. Every time I discuss this with Mario, I usually reflect on the training of public officials because I had a chance to represent Internet Society in Tunisia and nobody wanted to go. And I was working for the Foreign Office and they said, okay, I'll go. I understand. So I was discussing with Mr. Tayana, that was the foreign minister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and they said, okay. And I said, okay, we need to teach this, and that's why we have the South School of Internet Governance. Let me give the floor to Agustina Bricio, that has a long track record of working in the state, and she's been responsible for a division of the technology office or the information technology office, and she worked for the regulatory framework that was called AFIC. Well, it changed many names. So the regulatory entity of Argentina in telecommunications basically was AFIC, and that's where she worked. And she worked for many universities like Avellaneda, University of Palermo, and she's a partner of the Internet Society chapter for Argentina, and that is free for everybody that wants to participate. Agustina, it's a pleasure to have you here. Apart from that, she's my boss. Can you hear me? Yes. Sorry for having a sore throat. Because of the air conditioner, I have a sore throat. But, anyways, I would like to acknowledge Oscar and Olga. I was a student of the 10th edition of Internet Governance that was held in Washington before the pandemic. It was a great experience. I became involved with Internet governance because I come from telecommunications regulation. I was part of the regulatory entity, what is usually or now referred to as ENACOM. And apart from having a network of students that are highly in contact with each other and with other working groups, and I had a bias of the regulatory framework at that point, so it opened my eyes with a new range of decision making and how we build policies and how we evolve on the part of a state in a multi state world collaboratively without losing sight of the primary objective on the part of the state in terms of human rights. It's great to have you here. It's great to speak here. This is going to open a new network of contact that is key. This is cross-functional in terms of cooperation among sectors and among countries. I would like to refer to digital transformation because this is the topic of the panel here. Let me say that after the pandemic, we talk about digital transformation and all those issues related to artificial intelligence, cloud services, quantic computing, blockchain, and other things. However, on the part of the state, we say that technology as such, thought as a silo, facilitates, sometimes divides, or sometimes widens the gaps that we have in society. So, how do we leverage this successfully for the social benefit? Well, by designing regulatory framework that are customer focused or individual focused, something that we drove on the part of the state, thinking technology as inclusion with a gender-based perspective and with social justice because we believe that technology may widen the gaps that we have in society, especially the digital divide that has everything that has to do with access gaps, gender-based gaps, remoteness gaps. So it requires the states to provide dynamic responses given the social demands that have been created, especially after the pandemic. Because if we think of the digital divide as a deficiency of connectivity, if we understand the connectivity maps that we have published in ENACOM, we have connectivity. However, there are some other issues that give us the chance of not being connected. That's why we have 30% of households not being connected. So we need to understand the phenomenon of digital divide from the point of view of multidisciplinary areas that make this phenomenon more complex because one thing is to regulate on the part of the state. I'm a lawyer, for example, and I'm a clear advocate of regulation, usually safeguarding human rights and people. However, regulation has geographic limitations. It's very, very complex to think of providing a unique one size fits all response to digitalization or to the issue of regulation because we're limited by geography and apart from the jurisdictions that we have. We cannot regulate in a territory so far, but if we have a network that is cross border or transnational, we need to appeal to other issues to establish legal frameworks or effective public policy making to make progress. So there's no way of addressing these things that we have at the social demands in society if we do not address this collaboratively. That's why we've been working together with the secretariat, articulating discussions for open spaces to have equal representation of many sectors and to be heard. Because sometimes we do many, many things of public consultation that we sometimes find jurisdictions only gather the voices of the public sector only. So, in order to understand this from the very beginning of innovation and public policy, we have a gender based intersectorial commission where we have the public and the private sector together and civil society organizations to address gender-based digital divide, that is the lack of participation of women in the IT world. Those women that are subjects and users of solutions designed by men, and this should be addressed collaboratively by the public and the private sector to revert this trend. It's not a social issue or something that is a fad, and we need more women in the IT world. Also, we are addressing the issue of development because we are losing GDP points if we set aside or if we l- leave women out of this sector. So, one of the things that I would like to reaffirm, considering the topics here, is the challenge of the state of digital transformation. The main challenge is to come up with decision making process out of the public sector and to have a certain binding influence to prevail throughout time because we shouldn't be subject to the current administration or the willingness or lack of willingness of officials. I believe that is very important, as Mario said, of the way we educate these public officials. Because this is just one element, but political leaders that are very well educated following the discussions because technology is a determinant factor for the development of technologies in Latin America and globally. So we believe that in this sense, I come here as an undersecretary, especially having experience in the public sector, advocating this issue because I'm part of a political project that has been concerned with technology and to have the necessary benchmarks addressing the issues that society is faced with. To close my remarks, I would like to take the lessons of Doreen because it's a landmark that we have a woman chairing the International Telecommunications Union, leading the international strategies at the digital world with necessary resources for implementing this art technology. Doreen's lesson was not the only example that is memorable, but also the vice chair is the youngest elected vice president. So this is a clear transformation. For the first time in an international agency, we are going to have a young person and a woman leading the digital strategy. It's high time that we transform passive subjects or objects of public policy to have the same level playing field because women are merely users. Right now, we are decision makers in making decisions. And right now, they are transformed as active as decision makers at the international level, transforming strategies. So, right now, we are at a watershed moment to involve more women and to involve and to reach consensus because the challenge in the public sector and on the part of the state for digital transformation is to think of technologies with gender based inclusion and with the potential of transforming the reality. We need to transform the reality to build a better future, more sustainable, and more equal for everybody. Thank you very much. I was thinking of the many conferences and talks that are held by the Secretariat of Public Innovation. Michaela is going to be in the closing remarks with the gender based panel on Friday. But the digital points of access in the country are for people that are young and for the elderly also, because those are challenged because of their age. So they do great work with, and also the security office does a lot of work. I will give the floor to Ana Judith Chanto Orantes, that is the National Secretary of Science and Technology from the Republic of Guatemala. How do you see this approach from Central America? I have worked, for example, in many regional projects, and Central America is very interesting because those are small countries with complex geographies, islands with mountains, volcanoes, many challenges. How do you face an infrastructure that needs to develop to reach people, to reach the state, corporations? And how do you approach this from the regulatory point of view? It's great to have you here. Thank you very much, Olga. Thanks for the invitation. Good morning to all of you. Greetings from the government of Guatemala and from the National Council of Science and Technology. Let me follow my notes because in my team we prepare certain information that would be useful for the panel for the opening remarks. And secondly, I landed in Argentina at 4 in the morning. That's why I'm kind of dizzy, jet lag, and all of that. So I applaud the objective of the SSIG, where students and professionals may interact with these topics and participate in this hot debate on the internet and understands the importance and the awareness of internet and development of the region. For us in Guatemala, we've been participating and having preliminary talks with you, and despite that we have developing countries, small countries, we are making strong and large strides in order to develop science and technology and to put this at the forefront, which has not been a priority for decades because we have many economic crises, social and political crises as well. So we live the day to day instead of having a vision for the future. And the COVID 19 pandemic demonstrated the world, and especially Central America or Latin America, the weaknesses and the delays in connection to the well developed countries like Korea or Israel, that they believed in the usefulness of technology to develop and to accelerate their progress in an inclusive way, sustainable way, not to leave anybody behind. In this context, digital transformation became an unavoidable task and posed the challenge to accelerate the rate to be more competitive with a new norm, not to leave anybody behind. And even though digital transformation impacts all sectors of society, it does this at different rates, at different speeds, and with different intensities. When we address and when we talk about digital inclusion, it's not technology inclusion. It has to be a strategy or a comprehensive scheme to transform the way we produce, the way we educate, and the way we relate to one another, to transform the processes to be more effective, and to train human talent to acquire the necessary skills in this technological world by transforming technologies, optimizing or streamlining management. For example, in Guatemala and in Central America, we are wondering if we are educating the new generation in these new skills, digital skills, to work in the future, and if we are ready to export talent rather than to import to take those jobs in our country. So, digital transformation is a great range of opportunities, providing us with the necessary tools to make progress in the region by using public services, diversifying the economy, improving the quality of life of the citizens. And that depends on technology. So, we need to work jointly, and the National Science Secretary plays a key role in building trust among sectors, the academic world, together with the government and the private sector, raising awareness on the priorities that should be placed as a government so we become a facilitator, a bridge to make things happen from the regulation point of view, from training, awareness, civil society organizations, international cooperation. So you see a scenario where you have transdisciplinary, cross-functional teams that bring bring the most successful efforts. Let me bring some examples of Guatemala in technology because let me highlight or underscore some of the great projects like Luis Bona that invented CAPTCHA and language learning like Duolingo. I'm sure that you have taken classes by Duolingo in many languages. In education, Christian Banderher is the co founder of Plastic, and Plastic is one of the leading platforms of online e learning and develops telecommunications and has trained 4 million people in soft variables or soft skills in order to transform the economic world Latin America. And despite the challenges of the COVID 19 pandemic, the digital efforts are difficult. However, these corporations are making progress that are relevant issues inherent to the digital world, like the digitalization of educational processes, creation of capacities, and the investment in education, because it's the one that least has invested in accelerated digitalization and technology, Internet of Things, productive technology, legal certainty, regulatory framework, and primarily the approach to address lines of actions that are necessary to have political will. The support of leaders is important to carry this out, and we need full support in order to overcome the reluctance to change. And I'm addressing this from the point of view of the institution that has worked in one way, and I'm sure that you had the same experience. So, we should innovate, not to do things as we have done it historically. Guatemala and Central America rely on the investment on infrastructure. So it's a weak point as we have this as a developing country. So we need to carry out the digital transformation. We need to change the monolithical approach and to board the train of emerging technologies. It's an essential change of connectivity, development, and access. We have many challenges to cover, like, for example, the electricity grid. If we do not reach all communities, connectivity is not going to reach everybody. So, if we don't have access to information or training, for example, in Guatemala, only 3% of the population joins universities. So, higher levels of education is really a privilege. So, what are we going to do with 97% of the population? How do we bring these people to the informal sector to be trained and then to excel with their skills? So, we need to train human capital because it's no use having the latest technology if the human factor is the pillar of the prosperity of every single country. So we should analyze and design a long term scheme, a digital scheme, to reach future objectives by transforming the digital identity that is not a short term plan, but a long term one that could reach all entities. And that involves the stakeholders, all the stakeholders, by raising awareness of all the stakeholders to reduce reluctance and to increase participation of society, private sector, and the population at large. So thank you very much for giving us the chance to speak here and to learn from all of you in Argentina. Thank you very much. Let me applaud the panelists And we have two people in the audience that are going to be, I'm sure, asking questions virtually and face to face. Do we have questions in the audience here? It's important for the translators. My name is Soledad Martinez, and I work for the advocacy of, or the Ombudsman of Santa Fe. It's a key aspect to work with the Ombudsman by modernizing the institution. So the Ombudsman is working along these lines. One of the issues that we raised last year is the legislation of personal data protection in educational platforms, e-learning platform. How do you expose, for example, students from primary schools and teachers? In Argentina, there's no legislation that rules e-learning. How are you addressing this issue in other parts of Latin America? Good question. We are going to have the Visanchorena that is going to teach us on the personal data protection law. I'm not an expert in this field. I don't know Mario and Raul or Anna, and if not, we're going to raise this question for tomorrow. I'm going to be brief. I'm sure Beatriz is going to answer this more effectively. They're working along these lines with the Latin America Internet Society, and we have been actively participating in this field. We have made a lot of progress in the legislation. Many countries had made changes in the data protection law. For minors, it's kind of complex because sometimes we take protectionist approaches, and we need to strike a balance because we need to protect those minors' personal data. And in line with the agencies, we need to take the evolution skills. It's not the same addressing this for a 12-year-old or a 17-year-old. They have different skills of understanding. And also, we need to be careful with the protectionist approaches because sometimes they are detrimental for the teenagers in having access to internet services that are very, very important for participating in society and for the community from the digital point of view. But as Olga was saying, Beatriz is going to give us a very assertive answer of what the process is like and how they address this issue. I think we have the European framework. It's called FARO. It's like the beacon or the standard, the norm for trading personal data at the international level. So the law is borrowing this model. Let me underscore what I said before. The dimension or the pillar is not in the data, but in the human being. If we take the human being as a whole, data comes after. So if we focus primarily on data, we would be making a serious mistake. And the responsibility lies in private and public entities that should consider this right and this kind of situations. With Beatriz Anchorena, I'm sure that you can ask her because no public agency has a registration of database or declares or mentions in the way we deal with this data that is created. So there's a need of personal data law, but this is not done by the state. What that is not being done with a responsibility and in compliance with the prevailing law. There are no judicial entities that register their personal data because it's not required by law, probably. And there's, for example, the ombudsman or the advocacy agencies, especially when the state are Under cyber attacks, constantly, we have many situations, as Agustina said, and we accelerated the digital transformation agenda for the state. However, we did not accelerate the good practices, the good conduct, or the preventions necessary to address cybersecurity. There are two things that should be addressed. One thing is safeguarding the data protection of minors and the standards of cybersecurity. On the one hand, in the secretary that I'm responsible for, we have a model of information technology, and we urge agencies to adopt this. That is the minimum standard. And then also the treatment and some educational institution should address to the data protection law to deal with this data. There's no use of having many regulatory frameworks and be overlapping, but implementing an effective process of digital training. So we have an information security model that is being amended as we speak, and we have a collaboration process of the data protection law, the personal data protection law, that is going to be addressed by Beatriz tomorrow. Are there any online questions in the Q&A? No? If there are no questions, oh, there's one more question there. Could we pass around the microphone? It's necessary for the translation because the interpreter's at the back of the room and they are interpreting into English for some of the visitors. Can you hear me? Yes. Yes. I would like to ask you a question. What is the main obstacle that you find in order to reduce the digital divide? The digital divide as such is non-existent. There are many divides. It's not only the access divide that is related to investment and geographical challenges. There are many ways to overcome this geography or remoteness challenges that you may reach these people by satellite wirelessly, but also we have, I don't know, local rules, biases, and social reluctances or resistances because of misinformation of infrastructure. Like, for example, that antennas are the source of cancer or things like that if you use them. And there are fundamental issues like, for example, using effectively this technology. We may find illiteracy. For example, sometimes we have illiteracy and digital literacy because there are technologies that are not well thought from the point of view of accessibility. So they become complex, especially for people with disabilities. In case of gender-based gaps, well, there's a lot of gap there that prevent women from taking or making decisions in technology majors for career development. Is- Many people are not really studying mathematics and engineering, the hard sciences, or for people that are trained in social sciences and they want to join hard sciences. There are many obstacles that need to overcome to think of a society by reducing or bridging that gap. Not zero gap because it's impossible to reduce it to zero. From the public sector, let me tell you that one gap would be strengthening by we may reduce a gap that is a strengthening public entities because it's going to allow us to have more innovation, but we need to transform culture to improve databases to have the necessary pillars or the foundations because our administration changes every 5 years and the citizenry is what basically is, I mean, the citizenry is what is highly affected by the change of administration. So we need to address it from the foundations because we are providing a public service. For example, in the Senacid, we tell them that we are users of public services. We need to be served well, to be responded effectively, and if we are aware that we serve as a link, as a facilitator, we will learn or we will come to learn this process of transformation. There are also in Guatemala structural causes that may result into a development that, for example, is detrimental to society like malnutrition, acute malnutrition, poverty, literacy, not only formal education but digital literacy. For example, women in Guatemala, we have a, a registration or database of how many researchers we have, and only 33% of those researchers are women. That's why we drive an inclusion strategy for women and for Aboriginous peoples in the region because we need to be compatible with the Western and with the ancestral culture. So those Aborigines peoples are respected and those native languages are respected because in Guatemala we have more than 20 Aboriginous languages. That's why we primarily focus on these topics in Latin America. Raul and Mario, one last conclusion. Yes, I would like to add that from the point of view of connectivity, the great challenge ahead of us is to innovate from the technology, political, and regulatory field. I'm referring to speaking not only of a technology that is going to address all issues of connectivity, the challenges is to overcome the technology that we have available. So we need to develop first 5G, but 5G is not going to solve all evils. Yes, satellite communications are important. Fiber is important also to facilitate self regulated networks, community networks, to provide the necessary access to non licensed spectrum. But the important thing eventually is to innovate, to think of all the possibilities provided by technology. We have technology that allows access, and we need to innovate from the political point of view, to innovate with policy making, to leverage this innovation in regulatory frameworks also to facilitate different business models, operational models, and the access to different technology depending on the many different needs. Another crucial aspect that Agustina brought to the table was the collaboration internet governance model. It's not having one stakeholder with the know-how to address all kinds of issues. We need to appeal to all kind of intelligence across society to solve this. What Mario said at the beginning was because people feel that they are empowered and they have the necessary tools to participate in these panels, having technology, to have their own opinions, to collaborate, pursuing solutions. And the development of digital development is important because it gives us a reason or an objective to use communication tools. So, if interaction with public services is done digitally, this will drive more people to find an increasing use of tools to connect to the future. So, it's an ongoing challenge that we have because the expectations change. Once you have access to services, you want more services. So you need to satisfy those expectations, and it's something that should be done urgently. Thank you very much. Closing remarks for Mario. After all contributions, one more last takeaway. If after 20, 25, or 30 years of restoring democracy in Latin America, we continue with poverty, exclusion, and extreme poverty, Not only because of the gaps that were addressed by Agustina, and after 30 years, we do things like the way we do things. If we repeat a process, having a different result is crazy. So it's high time we innovated to think differently, to address this with a different approach, contributing, adding value to society with technology, accelerating the processes, with a cultural divide, with the digital divide, thinking outside the box with horizontal, collaborative, cross border organizations, putting an end to this divide and improving the lives of people and bringing them happiness. I like the ideal happiness. I believe that this should be the primary objective. However, thinking of the gap, the ITU requires that 2% of investment is allocated for investment in accessibility or having internet access, and we're far from this. But no internet tool or technology tool is magic or is done by magic. We need to break the policies and we need to think of the ecosystem of telecommunications comprehensively. Let me focus on Argentina because it's the example that I am aware of. We cannot make this political decision that sees the last mile of connectivity, but we should consider this comprehensively, like the university network that we have at the federal level, the knowledge economy law, what we have in Tierra del Fuego, everything that bridges the gap of inclusion and planning federally or at the federal level is very important. Thank you very much. Let me acknowledge all the panelists. Thank you very much. I would like to thank Mario and Raul for your time and for the contributions made. Thank you for supporting the South School of the Internet on Internet Governance. I would like to thank Anna and Agus. We will break for coffee now. We will do this inside the room and then we will break for lunch also. Thank you very much and let's go for a coffee break.